Hello my loves, Tony here from TL Yarn Crafts, and I've got another fun and free crochet pattern for you. This time we're leveling up our Tunisian crochet skills with the Tiffany ear warmer and cowl. Now this ear warmer is worked flat with a cute S-shaped closure, and the cowl is worked in the round with ribbing details on the top and the bottom. Now if any of these techniques are new to you, don't worry, I'm gonna be right with you every step of the way to break things down. Now, before we get started, I strongly recommend that you pull up the free version of this pattern on my blog. You can find an ad-free version of this pattern in my shop or get the PDF pattern with your all-in-one kit from Lion Brand. Are you ready to get stitching? Me too. But first, we need to talk materials. To make your ear warmer and cowl set, you are going to need some Lion Brand's Ferris wheel yarn. This is a worsted weight 100% acrylic yarn, and the entire sample uses 3 skeins. So you'll need 1 skein for the ear warmer, 2 skeins for the cowl, but you can swap in your own worsted weight yarn. Please just do a gauge swatch, check the yardage, because this yarn works up pretty thin and might even be closer to a DK weight versus a true worsted. Now, aside from the yarn, you will need several different crochet hooks, and let's go through them together. So first off, we're gonna need a 5mm hook. We're gonna use this for the ribbing in the top and the bottom of the cowl. We're also gonna need a 6.5mm Tunisian crochet hook. A short cord like this is just fine, and we're gonna use this to make the ear warmer. And finally, we're gonna need a 6.5mm double-ended hook. Now, we've got lots of options when it comes to creating that hook. You could use a normal double-ended hook just like this. I don't really prefer these. They're a little too short, so you do a lot of shifting around. So instead, I usually go for a corded hook. Now, we've got a few options. Most of us have probably purchased a single-ended Tunisian crochet hook set like this if you have a set, and if you want to create one out of this set, you certainly can. So we'll want to put the 6.5mm hook on one side, and we'll use this for our forward pass, and then on the other side you can put the 6mm hook. So they don't have to be the same size, we just need one of them to be 6.5mm, and that's what we'll use for our forward pass. Now the other option is to actually get a double-ended hook set. This one is also from Denise, and it comes with lots of sizes, and they are double-ended. So we're gonna need our 6.5mm set. They're both 6.5mm, and then we'll just put those on a short cord, just like we did the other one, and we'll have our double-ended hook set. Now we need a double-ended hook to work our cowl in the round, and I'm gonna show you how to do that momentarily. Now, aside from the hooks, we're also going to need a tapestry needle, a pair of scissors, and a few locking stitch markers. Once you've got everything, let's get started. We're gonna kick things off with the ear warmer. So grab your 6.5mm single-ended hook as well as your yarn, and let's get started. We're going to make a slip knot to begin our foundation row, and then the pattern, it tells you to chain 80. So that is going to be for an adult size ear warmer, and that chain is the width of your ear warmer. So we're gonna start with chains. Make sure you make these relatively loose because we will need to work into these. But again, chain 80 and then join me here when you've got all your chains. I'm making a smaller sample than the pattern, but you should have 80 chains. I've just got slightly less. So now we want to pull up loops in these chains, but we will do this in a particular way. So if we look, we've got the loop that's here on our hook, and just under that is our first chain. We're gonna skip that first chain and find our second chain. Once we found that second chain, we're gonna rotate our chain to the back, and we can find this channel of bumps going down the back of our chain. We're gonna start in the second chain from the hook, insert your hook from bottom to top through just that bump, yarn over, and pull up the loop. And we're gonna do that all the way down the line. So we're gonna start collecting loops onto our hook. I'm so glad I finally found metal Tunisian crochet hooks. Oh my gosh, it just glides like butter. I've got these linked down below too. They're now on Amazon. Wild. So we're gonna continue to pull up loops all the way down the line. Join me back here once you've pulled up all of your loops, and you'll know you did it right if you have the same number of loops as the number of chains that we started with. So for you, that should be 80. I'll see you in a minute. I now have all my loops on my hook, and I have the correct number. So now that we've worked all the loops onto our hook, we need to work the loops off. Just remember that each row of Tunisian crochet has 2 passes. We've now done the forward pass, collecting our loops. Let's do the return pass. To do that return pass, we're gonna yarn over our hook, pull through 1 loop to start, then yarn over, pull through 2, 2, 2, and 2 again, continuing to pull through 2 until you have just 1 loop left on your hook. Go ahead and do that and join me here when you've got just that 1 loop left. I'm nearly to the end of my row, but I wanted to jump back in because I know sometimes folks get stuck here when there's just 2 loops left. So that last step is to yarn over and pull through those last 2 loops, and that's how we get to just 1 loop left on the hook. Fantastic. So that completes row 1 of our ear warmer. It should look a bit like this, nice and stretchy. Now let's move on to row 2. So rows 2 through 5, so the next 4 rows, we're going to knit across the row. So Tunisian knit stitch. So this first loop on our hook counts as our first stitch. So we're skipping this very first vertical bar here. We're going to find this next vertical bar. That's our next stitch. But if we look, we actually have a front bar and a back bar to this stitch. To make the knit stitch, we need to split the bars. So I'm going to take the tip of my hook, push it down between the 2 bars of that stitch, pushing my hook to the back of the work. One more time, find the front and back bar of that next stitch, front bar, back bar, insert your hook between those bars, pushing to the back, yarn over and pull up a loop. Pull up a nice tall loop too, because knit stitch tends to curl pretty severely. So make sure you pull that loop up nice and high all the way down the line. So we're just gonna knit every single one of these stitches all the way down. So you can see when I pull up that loop, I'm kind of pulling my hook away from the work just to make sure I have nice tall loops on this knit stitch so I can minimize as much curling as possible. So continue to work your way down the line. We're not going to be changing our row counts at all, or our stitch counts rather. So you started with 80 stitches, you should end with 80 stitches every single row. Continue down the line, meet me at the end, and we'll start the return pass together. I'm getting towards the end of my row, just a few stitches left here. Now I wanted you to join me down here because we have to do something slightly different with the last stitch on our row. So before, we've just been splitting the bars of our stitch, but our edge stitches always work the same, and here's the correct placement for that stitch. So if we look at the end of our work, I always like to pull it apart a little bit. You'll see that we have a pretty prominent front bar here, but we actually need to grab this little bump that's right behind it. I like to call it the shadow because it's about half as high and sits just behind that tall loop here. So we want to get our hook under both of these loops. And here's the easiest way to do it. I like to take the tip of my nice sharp hook and I'm going to insert it under both of those bars at the same time. I can then yarn over, pull up the loop to complete that stitch. So now I've completed the forward pass. Let's jump into the return pass. Yarn over, pull through 1 to start, then yarn over, pull through 2, 2, and 2 again, all the way back. So you want to repeat this 3 more times. We're going to make 3 total rows of our Tunisian knit stitch. Join me here when you're ready for row 6. My knit section is done and it is curling up a good bit, but if I open it, you can see those lovely Tunisian knit stitches. Oh, it just looks so good. Like, why even learn to knit when you can just crochet? All right. So we are finished with the knit section. Let's move on to row 6 through 9. We're going to Tunisian reverse stitch across. So again, we've got that first loop on our hook. Wonderful. We're skipping this very first vertical bar. Now we need to find the back loop of our next stitch, which is right here, right there. So instead of going from the front and trying to grab that loop, we're actually going to go grab it in the back. So what I like to do, especially for this first stitch, I'm going to take the tip of my hook and I'm going to come up in the space between this first and second stitch, just like that. Now on the way out, I'm going to grab this loop here. That's the back loop of that next stitch. I'm holding on to this first loop here so it doesn't slip off my hook. So as I come out, I'm using the tip of my hook to grab that loop, and then I can yarn over and pull through it, just like that. Okay, so I still have the first loop that was already on my hook, and now I have that second loop. From here, it should be much easier. I'm coming up between stitches on the way out. I'm grabbing that loop, yarn over, pull through. Coming up between, yarn over and pull through. You can also just kind of rotate this towards you. That's usually what I do. Open this up a bit. And now we can grab those back loops just like this. They ended up looking a bit like the simple stitch loops. And the Tunisian reverse stitch is basically just simple stitch, but inverted, right? So we're going to go all the way across, grabbing those loops. And what that does is create this ridge along the front that looks a bit like purl stitches, but it's actually easier than and uses less yarn than the Tunisian purl stitch. That's why I like this reverse stitch. So we're gonna repeat this all the way down the line. And then when we get to that last stitch, like normal, we're gonna grab those 2 bars of the last stitch. So right here and right here, we're gonna grab those 2. So continue to Tunisian reverse stitch down the line, then you do your return pass, come back here, and we'll start the next row together. So the first row of my Tunisian reverse stitch is done. It's looking really good. It's a nice break in the pattern from the knit stitches. Let's start another row together. So this time we can very clearly see the space between our first and our second stitch. So once again, I'm pulling my hook up between those 2 stitches, and we're gonna try that one more time. As I come out of that space, I'm gonna grab that back bar. There we go. Took a little coaxing that time. Wonderful. And then we're going to repeat that down the line. So after that first stitch, which is always a little tricky, that's usually when I kind of rotate it towards me and I can grab those back vertical bars very, very easily. And it's creating another row of that lovely textured pattern. So we want to continue in this way, doing 4 rows of knit, 4 rows of our reverse stitch. And if you're ever wondering what row you're on, you can count your V's here on the side. So this first big V down here was our row 1. Here's 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those were our knit rows. Here's 6. And this first loop here is row 7. So that's how far we are so far. If we take a look at the ear warmer here, you can see if we start down at the bottom, we have our foundation row, then 4 rows of knit, 4 rows of reverse, 4 more of knit, 4 more of reverse, and 4 more rows of knit. And after that, we need to bind off. So go ahead and complete all of the rows here for your body and join me back here for the bind off. So I've got my sample done. Obviously mine is much smaller than yours, but this is what the fabric looks like. Now we need to move into the bind off, but we're gonna incorporate a decorative detail into the bind off. You can do this step, skip this step, totally depends on what you want your ear warmer to look like. But I'm gonna show you what the original worked up like. So now for our bind off, typically we would bind off in pattern. So I'm inserting as for knit stitch, pull up the loop, yarn over, pull through both, nice and loose because we don't want anything to pucker at the top, but we're gonna add one additional step to that. So first step, we're gonna bind off as for knit stitch. So I'm inserting my hook as I would for knit stitch into that next stitch, yarn over, pull up a nice tall loop and pull through the loop on the hook for a slip stitch. But we're gonna follow that with a chain 1. So this is going to create a nice little border along the top. So we worked this stitch. Let's grab the next one. Slip stitch as for knit, chain 1. Next stitch, slip stitch as for knit, chain 1, slip stitch, chain 1. So always inserting our hook as for knit. We're going between the front and back bars, just like we've been doing before. But now we're adding the extra step of adding a chain 1, and you can see it puts this nice little decorative detail on the top. I think it's super pretty, and I think it adds a nice kind of feminine touch to the ear warmer. But you can always skip this and just do a normal bind off if you want to. If you want to do the normal bind off, you would just not do these chain stitches. So chain 1, slip as for knit, chain 1, slip as for knit, chain 1, and you'll just repeat that all the way across the row. Join me at the end. We'll finish up together and then we'll work on the bottom border. I'm nearly at the end of the row, just a few more knit stitches here. I just want to make sure we're working this edge stitch the same, chain 1. So I'm inserting under both loops of that edge stitch. If you ever have trouble finding that, I know I'm telling you at the end of the project, but if you ever have trouble finding that, you can always pinch the fabric between your 2 fingers, and we're looking for this little V here at the top. So we're just grabbing both of those loops, yarn over, pull through, and after that last slip stitch, no chain there, we're just going to fasten off, but we want to leave a long tail for seaming. So I'm just gonna pull way more yarn than I know I need, just like that, and pull that loop up and out. Wonderful. Now let's flip to the bottom. We're just gonna go directly to the bottom, just like that. And then we want to join in this bottom corner here to start our bottom edge. So we're going to insert into this first stitch here in the bottom corner, grab our yarn, leaving a long enough tail to weave in the end later, and pull up that loop, chain 1. So there's our first slip stitch. We'll go into the next stitch, pull through, slip, chain 1. So this one's going to feel just like a normal slip stitch. We don't have to insert this in any special way. So we're just going through those bottom 2 loops. These would be the loops that are left over after we make our foundation. And we're just adding that lovely border detail. So you'll want to do this all the way across, all the way down to here, and then fasten off when you're done. Come back here and we're going to do the finishing steps together. All done with weaving in my ends. I just took a moment to do that really quick, and the only end I have left is the long one that we'll use to seam up our ear warmer. Now our next step is we do need to block this because it's so curly. It's just not going to lay flat on your head. So I have a blocking board here. I've got my garment steamer warming up off camera, and I'm going to flip this so the wrong side is up. I just find that's a lot more effective with achieving a nice flat fabric versus blocking it right side up. And this needs a lot of love. So first steps first, we're going to pin this all down around the edges. So I'm just going to grab some of my pins here. You'll block it to the final dimensions mentioned in the pattern. I'm just going to start putting my pins across. Alrighty, we've got it pinned down. Now we're going to steam it. Just keep in mind when you steam it, don't let the metal plate of the steamer touch your fabric. We don't want to flatten all that lovely texture on the other side. So just make sure your steamer is hovering above the fabric and steam it really good, and then we're gonna let it dry. My sample is now dry to the touch. I'm gonna take the pins out and let's talk about assembly. Now it's time to assemble this bad boy. So our first step is to flip it to the front side, and we want to bring the short sides together. So these ends, bring those together, make sure nothing's curling on you. There we go. I will say that Lion Brand Ferris wheel takes to blocking like a champ, so you shouldn't have any issues. Now that we've got the short ends together, we want to fold this into an S shape. So here's how we'll do that. I'm just going to bring this hand over and this hand under, okay? Just like this. Front S, Z, whatever you're feeling, okay? And we want to kind of even everything up, just like this. All right, so that is what we're going for. So you can let it go for a second and thread your tapestry needle. Probably could have done that first, but that'll just give us an excuse to do this part again, just to make sure you've seen it well. So again, bringing those short ends together like a little sandwich, and then we're going to fold them into an S shape, just like this. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers of fabric, and we want to make sure as we weave this, we get through all 6 layers. So I'm gonna start on this side because this is where my tail is coming out of, and I'm gonna try my best to catch this on the end. And again, try my best to grab all 6 layers to keep this bad boy together. Take your time. There's no rush on this step. And as you pull it pretty snug. Not too tight, but snug. Okay, and we're gonna go back and forth just a few times. Again, making sure we catch just the edge of all 6 layers. I'm gonna give it one more pass here, making sure again I grab all of my layers. You know what, I'm gonna pull out and really make sure I got them all. There we go, and pull that through. Now we want to make a knot, so I'm just gonna go under a couple loops here, pull through, so there's a knot there, and I'm gonna make one on this side as well. Okay, so now before I weave in this end or cut it or anything, I'm going to flip this right side out just to make sure that our S is all gathered, but it's looking pretty good. But here's a moment of truth, okay? If we flip this right side out, yay, we got it. So yours is longer than mine, obviously. So yours is gonna look a little bit different, but we've got this nice kind of curved opening. And if we look at the original, that's exactly what it looks like. Very, very pretty. A little bit different of a construction from normal ear warmers like this I've seen, but I think it adds a really nice accent. So your last step, I would recommend flipping this outside in, I don't know, inside out again, and then weave in this end, and let's move on to our cowl project. To get started with our cowl, we're going to start with the ribbing at the very bottom. So I'd like you to make a slip knot with your yarn, insert your 5mm hook, and then we're going to chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to start in the second chain from the hook. So the loop on the hook is here. Just below that loop is our first chain. We're looking for our second chain here, and we're just going to single crochet into that stitch and each stitch across. That's going to leave us with 5 single crochets as the base of our ribbing. Just like that. Chain 1, turn the work, and we're just going to work in the back loop of each of those single crochets. So when you're looking at the top of your stitch, the little V of your stitch, front loop is here, back loop is here. We're grabbing just that back loop and completing a single crochet. So there's 2, 3, here's 4, and 5, chain 1 and turn. One more time together, back loop, single crochet across. There's 3, 4, and 5. So you're going to repeat that for the number of rows specified in the pattern, which is 99. And once you're done with all of that ribbing, join me back here and we'll work on the body of our cowl. I've just finished my ribbing as far as I'm going to go, and now I can rotate to work along these row ends here. So this is going to be the bottom of our cowl. We'll eventually join this to work in the round, and we're building it up this way. Okay, so I'm going to drop my 5mm hook, and I'm going to go to my 6.5mm double-ended hook. So I'm just going to grab one side, and sorry for the tapping. Until we get these stitches loaded up, my other end of the hook is probably going to tap against the desk. Okay, so I'm just gonna get myself set up here, and the first thing we need to do is mark this first stitch. So this first loop on our hook is going to count as our first stitch. So I'm just gonna throw a marker on there just to make sure I can find it later on. Okay, here we go. Okay, that's just gonna tap, all right? All right, so first loop is already on the hook. We're gonna start working in this direction. That first loop counts as the first stitch, so we're skipping this first row here. Then we're gonna pull up a loop in the end of the next row. I'm just going to take this hook off for a second. It's going to drive me nuts. Okay, so there's the first. So we're pulling up a loop in each row end. But depending on how long your cord is, you're likely not going to be able to load all of your loops up at once. So I'm going to load up as many as I can. All right, so I've got a good amount of loops on my hook now, and it's going to start going to the other end. So I'm going to reattach my other 6.5mm hook. Again, you can use a 6mm for your return pass if you need to. So now I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to shift these loops down so that now they are at the tip of this hook here. So I'm going to leave this marker on here. I'm going to just flip it around to the other side. And to do our return pass, we're actually going to need a separate ball of yarn. So you'll be using the same color. I'm using a contrast color just for the demo here. So the first step is to yarn over the hook. We're going to pull through one loop to get this set. And then from here, and always for our return pass, we're just going to pull through 2 loops. Man, that is going to drive me nuts. We're just going to pull through 2 loops and stop when we have 4 total loops left on the hook. So this is what's going to allow us to work in the round, and this is always how we'll do our return pass. So yarn over, pull through 2 and 2 and 2 again until you have 4 total loops left on the hook. And I go with 4 left on the hook just to help me maintain my tension. Any less than that and the loops just start getting a little too loose for me. Okay, I've got 4 loops. 3 of my forward pass color, 1 of my return. At this point, I'm going to now shift my loops again and rotate my work, okay? Now from here, I'm gonna continue to pull up loops across my ribbing. Join me when you get to the end and I'll show you how we'll join this to work in the round. I just finished working across my row. I have the back side facing me because I just finished my return pass. for these additional stitches. I've got those 4 loops on my hook. So now I'm going to rotate things down and turn this. You know what, be conscious of how you turn it so you don't tangle your yarn. I'm going to turn it just like this. Now I'm going to bring the end to the end, because this is where we're going to start to join in the round. I've always found that it's just way easier to add a row of stitching first before we go joining anything. So our next step is to begin working in the round by working this next stitch as for knit stitch. So I'm just going to insert between the front and back bar of this stitch, going underneath the tail of my return pass yarn, yarn over and pull up that loop. Oh, you get out the way. There you go. And pull up that loop just like that. Now I'm going to move my marker and I'm going to mark this stitch. I found that when working this project, it was very important to mark the beginning of each texture change or each stitch change, just to make sure you can always identify how many rows you've done and exactly where you are. It's just an orientation thing. And then from here, we're just jumping right back into our knit stitch pattern. So we're just going to knit the next stitch here, and we're just working in knit for 4 total rows. So that stitch marker is going to let us know that that is the first stitch of the first row. So I'm going to work a couple stitches up here. Oop. There we go. Take your time. Be very careful that you're working 1 knit for each stitch across. And then once you've loaded up a few stitches, we can rotate, go to the other side. You shouldn't have as much issue with your double-sided. It's just because I'm trying to do this demo on camera, of course. But just rotate, and you're going to, again, just jump right back into your yarn over pull through 2 pattern. Kind of pull everything, make sure everything's staying close and tight together. And we'll do that return pass again until we have 4 loops left on the hook, just like that. And then again, pull the hook, rotate. Of course, I pulled it the wrong way and I'm tangled. There we go. You can cut that out. And then we jump right back into our knit stitches, just like that. So you'll want to work in knit until you have 4 total rows of knit. Remember that this loop here is your first knit stitch. So this is counting as your first row, and then you'll want to do 3 additional rows after you finish this one. So complete your knit stitches, and then we're going to jump into some reverse stitch. Alrighty friends, just for continuity, I do want to mention that I changed hooks. The tapping was driving me completely insane, so I hope this is better for everybody, but this is still a 6.5mm hook, and on the other end of this cord is another 6.5mm hook. So if we take a look at our work here, we can find our marked stitch, and then we can count up 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to be doing 4 rounds of each stitch pattern before we change. So I'm going to work up to that stitch, and then we're going to work our new stitch pattern. So I'm just continuing to work in knit stitch until I get to that stitch here. So remember, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. This is our next stitch right here. So now we're going to move into our reverse stitch. If you remember this from the cowl, we're going to go in between the stitch, so right in the space before the stitch we need to work. Grab that back loop on the way out, yarn over and pull up the loop. And we're just going to start doing that from here. Now, before I get too far, I always do like just a few stitches past it. But now I am going to mark this stitch as well. And I like to place a marker every single time I change stitch patterns. I find that it just helps in reminding myself where we changed at, or where the first row or the first stitch of this new stitch pattern is. And now I'm just jumping right into my reverse stitch pattern from here, and everything else stays the same. I'm going to continue to work my loops up until I have plenty on here, and then I'll shift my loops down, work my return pass, and continue working in the round. Okay, so since I changed color, since I'm using a different color for my return pass, that's what's being pushed forward here. Okay, just so you're aware. And that's what's going to continue to happen here for my sample, but you're working with the same colors, the buttercup color of Lion Brand Ferris wheel, if that's what you happen to be using. So you shouldn't see any change in color, but that's just something to look out for if you want to use 2 different colors in your project. So from here, we'll want to continue. We're going to make 4 rows of knit, 4 rows of reverse. I'm going to grab the original sample, which I have right here. So this is a quite long cowl, and we're looking at the back here. So this is what the jog looks like when we change from our previous stitch pattern to the next stitch pattern. And we can see that all the way up the row, but it's pretty unnoticeable. If anybody's looking that close, just, you know, give them a little back up, you know what I'm saying? So this is a very long cowl. And just be aware that you can change the width of this. Just add any number of rows onto your ribbing to make your cowl wider, and to make it longer, just continue to add rows. So we're gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 sections of stitching, and each section has 4 rows in the respective stitch pattern. So I'm gonna add a little bit more length onto my piece here, just alternating 4 rows of knit, 4 rows of reverse, 4 of knit, 4 reverse, and always marking the first stitch of each stitch change. Okay, so continue on with your cowl. I'm gonna add some length to mine. Join me back here and we'll talk about binding off. Alrighty, my friends, after a whole bunch of stitching, you should have a nice long cowl with several sections of your knit stitches and your reverse stitches. And I'm not gonna lie, I hadn't tried this with 2 different colors, but man, that's actually kind of cute. I don't know, I might be onto something. Okay, let's move into our bind off. So we're going to go to page 4 in the pattern, or all the way at the bottom of the blog post, and talk about our bind off. So we are meant to complete our final round until we have just 1 loop of each of our yarns. So 1 of the return pass and 1 of the forward pass. So I'm going to complete this return pass until I have 1 loop of each color, just like that. So when we go into the bind off, step 1, we're going to turn this to the right side, which means I'm going to move my hook over just like this, kind of tighten everything down a little bit, get my tension back. And the first step is to slip the forward pass yarn through the return pass yarn. So we're going to do that just like this. So that is step 1. And now we're going to slip stitch each stitch around. So I'm going to work this as for knit. I'm going to insert into the next stitch as for knit, yarn over, pull through both loops. Don't do this too tight because we will need to work into these for the top ribbing. But I'm just going to continue all the way around the top of my cowl here, pulling up nice tall loops as I make my slip stitches, so they'll be easy to get into on the next step of our bind off. So continue all the way around and join me when you get to your return pass yarn over here, and we'll finish up together. I'm nearing the end of my round. I also detached the other end of my hook because I just don't need it anymore. We're just working on the bind off. So I've got just a couple more stitches here to slip stitch as for knit. Last one is here, making sure I don't grab that return pass yarn. And there we go. Okay, so now I'm gonna pull that loop up, and I'm going to fasten off my forward pass yarn, and I want to join this with an invisible join. Now what the invisible join does is just gives us an anchor for when it's time to make our ribbing here on the top. So I'm going to grab this next stitch right here, go under both loops of that slip stitch, and then I'm going to go back under the slip stitch that I came out of. Give that a little tug, and you can see nice clean end here. At this point, we can also fasten off our return pass yarn. And it is recommended at this point that you do weave in your ends because we'll need to make our top ribbing. I'm also going to take out these markers just to get them out the way, but this is listed in the finishing section a couple lines down. So let me get things cleaned up a little bit and we'll work on some top ribbing. I am back at the end of my work. I weaved in all of my ends except this one. It's actually long enough to seam this close, which is part of our finishing step. So I'm just gonna leave that one attached. But before we do that finishing step, I want to get you started on this top ribbing here. So this top ribbing is going to mirror the bottom ribbing, but we have to do it as an applied ribbing. So we're going to collect stitches along this bind off edge to anchor our ribbing to our cowl. So the first step is to join with a slip stitch in any stitch kind of near that invisible join that we did. So the invisible join, I'm sure, is right here. So I'm just going to join a little bit in front of it because I don't want that to be the very first stitch because it'll probably come out. You know what? I think I might even go another stitch ahead. So then we'll just work that like a normal stitch kind of in the middle of the row instead of it being the beginning or the end. Now I've got my working yarn here. I'm going to yarn over. Oh, and I'm using my 5mm hook, going back to my smaller hook here. and I'm going to pull up that loop. And then I'm going to chain 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. From there, I'm going to find the second chain from the hook. So here's our first loop, which does not count as a chain. Here's our first chain, second chain is here. So we're just going to single crochet into that chain. 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we single crocheted into the second chain from the hook, and each chain down the line, just gonna kind of tighten that slip stitch a little bit. And we're gonna join with a slip stitch in the same stitch that we joined at, as well as the next slip stitch. So that's how we anchor it, by slip stitching at the end of those single crochet rows. Now we're gonna turn our work. I want you to skip these first 2 slip stitches here. This is the first single crochet of the row. So we're going to work in the back loop of that stitch. So if we take a look at this stitch, we have a front loop and a back loop. We're just going to grab the back loop, just like that, and complete a single crochet. Back loop, single crochet, all the way down the line, just like that. So let's do another couple rows together, and then I'm sure you'll have the gist. So we'll chain 1 and turn, and then we're going to single crochet in the back loop of each stitch, again, down the line. So there was 1, here's 2, 3, 4, and 5, just like that. Now we'll find the next 2 stitches here on our cowl. So this one is worked. Here's the next one and the following. We're going to slip stitch in each of those, making sure we grab just the loops of the slip stitch. There's 1 and 2. Now we turn, skip those 2 slip stitches, single crochet in the back loop of each stitch across. Just like that. Okay, so we're going to repeat that all the way around our cowl opening. So we'll chain 1, single crochet back loop across, slip stitch in each of the next 2 stitches here on the cowl, turn the work, skip the 2 slip stitches, single crochet through the back loop of each single crochet here. So at the end, this ribbing will look exactly like this ribbing. Now after that, we're going to need to seam this closed. Since this bottom part already has some ribbing on it, we're just going to do it here, but you would mimic that up here as well. Just make sure when you fasten off this blue yarn, you leave enough of a tail to close things up. So I'm going to grab my tapestry needle, and I'm going to go on the inside of my cowl here. So I'm going to grab just the back loop of this stitch, and I'm going to grab the base over here and pull it through. We're just going to whip stitch this close. Back loop, and grab your next stitch, back loop, grab your next stitch. Remember there are 5 stitches here, back loop, grab that next stitch, just the stitch, there we go. And the last back loop is right here, there it is. And grab this stitch on the edge. And as I come through there, I'm gonna see if I've got enough tail to create a knot. I do. So I'm just going to pull that through. Oop, not too tight, not too tight. Come on now. Okay, there we go. Pull that through, and now that's knotted, and then we'll weave in this end. So I'm just going to go right here and weave in this end. There you go. And you will do the same on this side when it's done. So you have nice clean ribbing. This will be what it looks like from the front. No interruption on the pattern, but on the back, like I said, there is a little bit of a jog between the old stitch pattern and the new stitch pattern. You get a nice, thick, squishy cowl out of this, and I hope you had so much fun making this project with me today. I am super duper proud of you for practicing a new skill, most likely. I don't think too many of us have done Tunisian crochet in the round, and I'm glad to share this with you. Now, if you enjoyed making this project, I absolutely want to see it. So make sure you tag me on Instagram at TLYarncrafts, or you can share your project on Ravelry. Just look up the Tiffany ear warmer and cowl. You can also show off your project inside the TLYC Makers Facebook group. Now make sure you go down to those comments, tell me how this went for you, any questions that you still have. And my loves, that is it for today. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for hanging. Bye.